I would love to start my very own vegetable garden, but it's so time consuming. And have you seen the cost of fertilizer?
Nonsense, poopy pants!
While there are plenty of high maintenance crops out there that need a lot of love, attention, and feeding, there are also a ton of lazy vegetables out there that not only thrive on neglect, but actually hate fertilizer. And that is what I'm going to feature on this video. Whether you have a very tight budget, you don't have a lot of time to dedicate to your garden, or you're trying to grow as much food as possible and you want some low maintenance plants that can grow on autopilot so you can dedicate more of your time to the higher demand plants, this video is for you.
If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and check out my Amazon store and Spreadshop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom apparel and gear.
The first crop that hates fertilizer is beans, and I'm talking both bush beans and pole beans. So you have your string beans, your pole string beans, your dragon tongues, your lima beans, all of your beans. That is because they are legumes, and legumes have the very unique property of being nitrogen fixers. Legumes can make their own fertilizer. They can make their own nitrogen in their roots. Their roots form an association with soil bacteria, and the bacteria cause nodules to form on the roots, and the roots are actually then able to filter nitrogen from the atmosphere, because the air we breathe is 80% nitrogen, and trickle it down and store it in their roots. So legumes are actually fertilizer factories. So because of this phenomenon, it's very easy to over fertilize your beans and other legumes. What looks like a normal amount of fertilizer for most plants can actually downright harm your plants. If you over fertilize your legumes, you'll be giving them too much nitrogen. So that will cause them to form an overabundance of leaves, and this will come at the expense of the flowering and fruit cycle. So you'll have bushy or very viney plants that will produce very poorly. And in some cases, if you give them way too much fertilizer, this could actually inhibit their growth and disrupt their metabolism. So you can actually have your plants start to turn stringy or even yellow and die on you in some cases. So if you've grown beans in the past and you've had issues with them producing, well, chances are you're probably overfeeding them. They are made to grow in relatively lean soil. So when it comes to growing your beans, less is more. The best way to plant beans is directly out into your garden, punch a hole about 1 inch deep, sow a bean per hole, and then for the most part cover them up, water them in, and set it and forget it. You may be able to top dress the soil a little bit with an organic fertilizer at planting, but other than that, it's best to just walk away and just make sure they are irrigated properly and just check them over periodically for any kind of pest damage. Okay, so context. When I say hate fertilizers, I mean hate fertilizer routines. The crops featured in this video do not need a regular fertilizer routine. For example, I feed my tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, squashes, melons, and things like that every 2 weeks because they're high-density plantings and they're shallow roots that heavily deplete the top 8 to 12 inches of soil. You need to keep adding nutrients to your gardens to keep those fast-growing plants productive. So those heavy bearing crops require regular feedings. The crops featured in this video do not need a regular fertilizer routine. However, they still need fertile soil. I mean, you can't grow these crops in beach sand. They still need some nutrients. So you should be regularly amending your garden soil with compost and organic matter as a good practice because soil health still matters no matter what you grow. But aside from basic soil maintenance and a top dressing of fertilizer at the planting time, after that, you don't really need to fertilize them again. So I recommend top dressing your soil with a slow release granular organic all-purpose fertilizer, something around a 555 NPK like this. Any of these general organic fertilizers you get at the store that have NPKs less than 5 per number are going to be just fine and are going to be so slow release. They'll provide the basic nutrients you need without disrupting negatively the biology of these light feeders. After you sprinkle this organic fertilizer on top of your trenches, water it in, and walk away. Fertile soil doesn't need any more fertilizer than that initial little sprinkle. So once you're done with that, aside from proper irrigation and checking on your plants regularly to make sure no pests are getting to them, that's really all your crops need. The second crop that hates regular fertilizing are peas, and when I say peas, I mean shelling peas, snap peas, and snow peas. Peas are also a legume, so all of the rules that I just told you verbatim for your beans are also true. Peas have the ability of forming those nodules with the association of the bacteria in your soil, so they are able to filter nitrogen from the atmosphere and store them in their roots. So their roots are basically a fertilizer producing factory. So it's very easy to over-fertilize them. Just like beans, you direct sow your peas once soil temperatures are above 55 degrees or so. They like generally cool weather, but after you sow them, you can sprinkle a little bit of that granular organic on your pea trenches and then water them in and walk away. You don't want to fertilize them any more than that. If your soil is very fertile and super rich in fresh compost, you may not want to fertilize them at all. They pretty much make all of the nitrogen they need, so if you give them too much, that's going to negatively impact the flowering cycle, leading to poor pod formation and lack of peas. And in some instances, if you add too much, you'll add so much nitrogen that the nodules will fail to form, and that will interrupt the metabolism of the plants, and they can actually wither on you. So if you've ever planted peas, and of course string beans and other beans, and your plants start withering away on you and you're wondering what the heck is happening, that's probably because you're over fertilizing and you shouldn't be giving them any at all, especially water solubles. You never give your peas and beans water soluble fertilizer. Crops 3 and 4 that absolutely loathe a regular fertilizing routine and should be fertilized minimally are carrots and parsnips. We eat the root of the carrot and parsnip, and they take a long time to grow, relatively speaking. They like growing in light, loose, loamy, well-draining soil that is fairly lean and don't have a lot of rich organic matter and nitrogen in them, because if you have soils that have an overabundance of nitrogen, or you overfeed them and give them too much fertilizer, you'll grow big green tops at the expense of roots. But the problem with over-fertilizing your carrots and parsnips don't just stop at big green tops and small roots. If you over-fertilize, you can also wind up with misshapen roots, split roots, and forked roots. Now, most people know that one of the keys to getting great, beautiful, straight carrots and parsnips is to have very light, loose, well-draining soil. And that's what I have here in this raised garden bed. So there are a lot of growers that struggle growing these crops, and they say, why am I getting such poor root development? Why are my carrots and parsnips coming out deformed and misshapen and split and forked, even though I have light, loose, well-draining soil? Well, it could be because you're simply overfeeding them. It's better to underfeed your carrots than it is to overfeed them. So one of my secrets to having beautiful, perfect carrots is to make sure that we don't give them too much love. Carrots and parsnips largely thrive on neglect. And another telltale sign that your carrots and your parsnips are too overfed is you'll get a ton of hairy roots everywhere as well. See, if you do it right, you'll have relatively straight carrots with medium tops. They won't be overwhelmed. That's the secret. Don't over-fertilize. Less is more. The less you do, the more you do.
The less you do, the more you do.
Another telltale sign that your carrots and your parsnips are being over-fertilized is you'll have a spongy texture and they won't store as long in cool storage. So if your carrots are rubbery and spongy, you're probably overfeeding them. They should be really crisp, and I'll prove that on camera right now. The best thing about growing your own food is that you don't have to wash them off, and hey, a little bit of dirt don't hurt. You can't fake that crunch. So sweet. This is a properly grown carrot. Crops 5 and 6 that hate fertilizers are beets and turnips. Beets and turnips, just like carrots and parsnips, are relatively slow-growing root vegetables that like to take their time and form large roots in well-draining soil that are fairly lean in nutrients. And if you fertilize them too much, you're going to see a lot of the same problems that you will see when you over-fertilize your carrots and parsnips. Over-fertilizing your beets and turnips will produce large greens in expense of the roots. So if you don't want to eat the roots and you want to grow turnip greens and beet greens and eat them instead, well, in that case, you can disregard what I'm saying and you can feed them fairly heavily in nitrogen, or even give them water-soluble fertilizers, because that will produce lots of green tops and it will really make the roots suffer. But if you're like most of us and you harvest the beets and the turnips for the roots, over-fertilizing them is going to yield a lot of problems. Over-fertilizing will create small woody roots that are not tender at all. They will have a wood-like texture and be low in sugar. The best way that you grow nice big beet roots and turnip roots is to grow them in well-draining soil that has limited fertilizer, less is more, and irrigate them evenly and regularly. That will give you large, tender roots. Just let them do their thing. Don't give them too much love. It's best to walk away and give them the benefit of time. Crop number 7 that hates fertilizer is radishes. Are you starting to see a pattern here? These root vegetables that love being direct sown in very well draining soil tend to hate a regular fertilizing routine, and they tend to thrive on neglect where less is more. Well, whereas the carrots and the parsnips and the beets and the turnips that I just mentioned tend to take their time when growing, radishes are the exception. They grow outrageously fast. In fact, from the day you sow that seed into the ground, radishes are usually mature and ready for harvest in less than 1 month. They are one of the fastest growing crops that you can grow, bar none. And as such, if you fertilize them incorrectly, or at all, you tend to have a multiplying effect on how bad the effects show, because their life cycle is so short. Just like the other root crops that I mentioned, over-fertilizing your radishes will produce large radish tops, but small roots that tend to be spongy, misshapen, and crack on you. So if you've ever seen your radishes split on you, or they look really funny and they have dents on them, or they're really scratched up, chances are that's either because your soil froze so severely for so long that all of the radishes split, or you're over-fertilizing them and their biology is off because they are getting way more nutrients than they want. They like growing in relatively lean soil. So hopefully you're getting the message here. If you're having issues growing a lot of your root crops and legumes, it's probably because you're over-fertilizing them. I really mean it. Less is more when it comes to growing them. All they really need is solid irrigation, some organic matter occasionally worked into the soil, and periodic checks on them to make sure that no pest is coming along and eating them. Other than that, they really grow themselves. But crop number 8 is a wild card that breaks all of the rules. Yeah, I'm throwing you a curveball here. Crop number 8 that hates fertilizer is determinate tomatoes, but this one has an asterisk next to it. Now, initially, when you transplant your determinate tomatoes out into your garden, you're going to have to treat them like every other tomato plant that you've ever grown. They are heavy feeders that need a regular fertilizing routine. I strongly recommend you fertilize all your tomatoes at the time of transplanting and every 2 weeks indefinitely until their life cycle is complete. So that means for a lot of the tomatoes we grow, that is a long fertilizer routine of 3, 4, 5 months every other week, depending on how long your growing season is. But here is where determinate tomatoes are different. Determinate tomatoes grow to a predetermined height, usually anywhere from 30 inches to about 4 feet tall, and then after that they top out and they produce all of their flowers, all of their fruits, then they ripen all of the fruits, and then they die back. They don't grow indeterminately all the way until frost like an indeterminate tomato does. Therefore, when you grow a determinate tomato, there is a hard stop to the time that you fertilize them. Once they set all of their fruits and their fruits start reaching a mature-ish size where it starts ripening the first fruit or two on there, at that point you can cut off fertilizing them because you don't need additional final fertilizers. If I'm growing an indeterminate tomato vine, I have to fertilize that all the way until a month or two before frost because they need to grow all the way until frost. But if I'm growing a determinate tomato and that life cycle is going to stop on me, you get to a point where it doesn't make sense to fertilize them anymore. So once those tomatoes reach that mature green stage and you start to see the first one flush, you can cut them off totally because you're not going to need to give them any more food. There will be enough residual nutrients in the soil. So for that reason, they are a heck of a lot easier to grow. They never need to be pruned because they top out on you. You just need to support them and let them do their thing and give them enough fertilizer to get to the point where they make all of their green tomatoes, and then you can cut them off and just protect them, make sure they don't get hit by any insect pests or things like that. They're much easier to grow than their indeterminate counterparts. And that right there is an amazing list of things that you can grow out in your garden that hate fertilizer. So if you were looking for some of the easiest, laziest things to grow with the least amount of maintenance possible, please consider planting these. However, on the other hand, if you have great success growing things like tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and squashes out in your garden, but you've always struggled growing root crops and legumes, and you're thinking to yourself, man, why am I having trouble growing these? These should be so much easier to grow. It's probably because you are giving them too much love. Your soil is too rich or you are over-fertilizing them. So try allowing them to thrive on neglect. Give your soil less amendments for them. Don't give them any fertilizer at all. Just make sure that you're amending your soil with compost as usual on a seasonal basis. Make sure they are well irrigated. Keep an eye on them to make sure nothing is eating them. And then just let them thrive on neglect. They will do most of the work for you. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and please ring the notification bell so you're notified when I release more videos like these. I'll drop some seed links down in the video description for your convenience as well for some of my favorite varieties of the different species of crops that I mentioned. For everything that I use in real life to grow my vegetable garden, I'll place direct links down in the video description for some of my favorite things. For everything I use in real life in my entire yard and garden to grow everything, that's all linked in my Amazon storefront. So expand the video description, click on the Amazon storefront link. You'll see everything I use in real life. And while you're down there, check out my website, themillennialgardener.com, for all things gardening and custom homemade merch to support my channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. Guess what, Dale? Today is the 15th of the month, one of your favorite days. So it is our monthly Heartworm Preventative Treatment PSA. If you have yourself a dog, one of the most important things you must have them on is a monthly anti-parasitic to prevent heartworms, because heartworms is one of the deadliest diseases that kills dogs. All you need to do for your dog to get heartworms is to be bitten by one infected mosquito any time of the year, and they can get heartworms, and the worms eat little tiny holes in your pup's heart. And it's a slow, painful death. When we worked for a shelter for years, half the dogs that came in were heartworm positive, and the treatment is absolutely miserable because the dogs are not allowed to go for any walks, they can't play, and that's because there are so many holes in the dog's heart that they can't have their heart beat quickly and do anything excited. So they have to put the dogs basically in isolation and quarantine for months until the holes in the hearts heal, and even then some of the dogs would die during the treatment. So it was a terrible thing, and all you have to do to prevent that is to give them a very safe, almost no side effect heartworm preventative. So now Dale's good for another month. We have to have our Dale for as long as possible because he's so beautiful and so wonderful.